So it looks like Barney was deathly afraid of Billy the Kid. Like I said, he was a kind of sort of hanger-oner of the boys there at Fort Sumner, but he also was maybe not as much of a tough little ass kicker as he liked to pretend. Somewhere along the line, he and the kid got crossways even before Barney went to work for Garrett, and Paulita Maxwell shared a pretty funny story concerning the two. She would say, quote, Barney Mason, Pat Garrett's brother-in-law, lived in Fort Sumner for many years, and wanted people to think that he was much braver than he was. But despite his boastfulness and his pose as a bad man, Fort Sumner always took his courage with a few grains of salt. When Billy the Kid and his followers were at the height of their success, Barney pretended to be a great friend of theirs. He gave them information, warned them of danger, and could not do enough for them. But when Pat Garrett was made sheriff and the forces of law began to close in on the kid, Barney had a change of heart. He accepted a deputyship under his brother-in-law and became as great an enemy of the kid as he formerly had been a friend. This embittered the kid, and he sent word to Barney that he was going to kill him on sight. Secretly, the kid's threat scared Barney half to death, but he put up a brave show. The kid can't scare me, he boasted. I'll teach him a thing or two if we ever meet. But every time the kid rode in, Barney rode out. He never got within a mile of the kid if he could help it. One day when Barney was driving to town from Santa Rosa with his wife beside him on a wagon seat, he saw the kid coming toward him on horseback along the road. The situation looked ticklish for Barney. The country was open range and not a tree or rock to hide behind, and a desperado who had sworn to kill him about to pass within a few feet and face to face. In this crisis, Barney did some quick thinking. While the kid was still far off, Barney jerked the black mantilla off his wife and draped it about his own shoulders, and clapped her sunbonnet on his own head. Then he snuggled down into the seat, made himself look as small as possible, and clucked up his horses into a brisk trot. With his face concealed beneath the sunbonnet, he drove past the kid and was greatly relieved when he arrived at Fort Sumner to find himself still alive. Then he went strutting about town, telling how he had met the kid on the road and had opened up fire on him, and the kid had taken to his heels and had been lucky to escape behind a hill. I told you what I'd do to that feller if we ever met, boasted Barney. And along toward evening, the kid came jogging into Fort Sumner. And as usual, the panic-stricken Barney got on his horse and ran away and hid himself in the hills. Everybody, of course, wanted to hear from the kid all about his narrow escape from death at Barney Mason's hands. When the kid heard the story Barney had been telling, he bent double with laughter. I recognized him the moment I saw him. His mantilla and sunbonnet didn't fool me. I would have killed him if his wife hadn't been with him. I didn't want to drop him over dead in his wife's arm. End quote. Now, when Pat was first elected sheriff, he did have Mason continue mingling with the criminal element over there at Fort Sumner in hopes of gathering intel, which is what he was doing leading up to that big raid from a posse. Thinking he was in for a long siege, Pat had a wagon of supplies brought in, bacon and such. Weren't long before the smell of frying fatback drifted on down to the stone house and a white flag went up. Them boys holed up inside that little house were hungry as hell, and besides, they knew there wasn't no way out. Not with that dead horse blocking the door. The kid said as much, remarking that Garrett would have just starved them out, and besides, I thought it was better to come out and get a good square meal. Rudaball emerged first, then Wilson, Pickett, and finally the kid. At least one member of the posse, Barney Mason, advocated killing the kid right there on the spot, on account of him being such a sneaky snake, but others backed him down. Pat didn't arrive back in Lincoln until the day after the escape, but he quickly organized a volunteer posse to track the kid down, with 0 results. Next, he dispatched Barney Mason to see what he could find out. The deputy was able to track Billy all the way to Fort Sumner. I don't suppose it took no genius to figure out that's where he was headed, and with a tip from the locals, he soon found Billy in the company of a few Mexican sheep herders. Noticing that the kid was armed to the teeth and not looking all that friendly, Mason did what he had always done and put spurs to his mount and skinned on out. He did then attempt to raise a posse in nearby Fort Sumner, but couldn't find no takers, so he just went on back home. Man, poor old Pat Garrett just could not catch a break when it came to deputies.